Our economic future is at stake. And I don't mean everybody. Of course, the very wealthy will be fine. I mean the average, everyday American. And it's happening primarily for one main reason. That's what I want to talk about here today. Hey everybody, welcome to my second channel where we talk about finance and economics in a much more relaxed setting. Today, we're going to talk about something very important, and it blends finance with economics, and it really does put our economic future, not just for ourselves, but for the generations after us, at risk. So let's get right into it. Now, first, this does somewhat relate to what's known as end-stage capitalism or late-stage capitalism, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. The very last stages of capitalism. This could last a few years or it could last decades. Now, some of the symptoms of this are what we're experiencing. It is basically corporations and businesses trying to extract as much money as possible from the consumer base. Now, some other symptoms of this are also diminishing product quality while prices increase, which is something that I think we all experience on a day-to-day basis. Now, this happens because corporations literally want to save as much money as possible while making as much money as possible to deliver as much money as possible to shareholders. Now, why is this happening? Well, because that's how the system was designed. Our entire economic system is designed around GDP increasing. In fact, the United States, the government, the economy, retirement, none of this works as long as GDP continues to increase, as long as the stock market continues to move up. In fact, the average everyday American, the ability for that person to retire, unfortunately, is also directly tied into this system. How? Well, simply put, if GDP does not continue to increase, then the government can't continue to borrow money. It can't continue to inject money into the system. The debt to GDP ratio of the government collapses and everything falls apart. Not only that, but retirement accounts are directly tied to the stock market, which must continue to go up in order for those retirement accounts to grow, in order for the average American to be able to retire. So on one side, I think that this system is directly hurting the average American, while at the same time, this system is literally, the average American relies on this system to be able to, at one point, retire. So what is going on, and why has this happened, and how did we get here? Well, in my opinion, and I say this all the time, I talk a lot about finance and economics in general, but two major things that I constantly talk about are, one, the fact that the one thing that would solve most Americans' problems is to fix the discrepancy between wages and prices. I talk about that all the time. The other thing I harp on nonstop is how we politically need term limits for our elected representatives. Okay? That means the legislative branch. That means Congress. That means the Senate. And I'm going to explain to you in this video why. It is the reason why we got here. It's all tied together. Unfortunately, economics and politics are tied together. So let's talk about it. Basically, what is going on is you have a thing that was meant to be a civic duty. Okay? Elected officials were not meant to be these these career politicians that they have turned into. It was supposed to be a civic duty that you do on behalf of your country. Okay? What has happened, and the system has transformed into this thing where politicians, and this is both sides of the aisle, I want to see term limits for everybody. Politicians have created a career out of being a representative. You see lifelong politicians in office. Now, the reason this is such an issue is primarily because of the fact that this basically creates an environment where these politicians are incentivized to get reelected, to continue their career. Because instead of doing something else and doing this as a civic duty, they've made this their career. So in that case, the question then becomes, well, how do I continue to get reelected, right? And this is where the basically the conflict of interest begins. So if you do what you should do as a politically elected representative, it means do what is best for the majority of your constituents. That means for your city, that means for your state, that means for the country if you are a president. The problem is when it comes to the legislative branch in particular, who can help them get reelected? And how do they get reelected? Well, we live in a day and age where advertisements are king. Who can spend the most amount of money on political campaigns and advertisements usually has a significant edge. Which means when major corporations legally lobby our politicians to do what's best for them in return for funding their campaigns, you get a conflict of interest because you have politicians who should be doing what's best for their constituents that elected them. The problem is the constituents that elected them cannot compete monetarily with the lobbyists who represent corporations that can dump millions of dollars in campaign funds, in lobbying, and in other incentives like potential job offerings or consulting opportunities to these politicians. So you get a conflict of interest. And this comes back to term limits. So people sometimes ask me, okay, well, how does term limits, you always talk about term limits. How does that help anything? Well, simply put, it might not completely solve the issue, but it kind of eliminates the incentive, at least to some degree, for these politicians to only care about getting reelected. Because if they had 1, 2, even 3 term limits, eventually they're going to know that, hey, I'm not in this for a career. So I'm going to do, at least to some degree, what's better for my constituents because they elected me and I have 6 years here. I have 4 years here, I have 10 years here. Whatever those term limits are, it is a limited period. So especially in the last term limit, if it's a 2-term limit, the last term limit, or even better, if it's a 1-term limit, when you have these corporations that come and try to lobby, it's not as much of a pull because you don't need the money to fund your future campaign because you're not getting reelected because you can't get reelected. Now, there are other ways at fixing this, right? We could eliminate lobbying. The United States is one of the only Western countries that allows lobbying to the degree that it is. Why? Well, that's where these conspiracy theories start to find themselves. In reality, some of them might be way out there, but potentially there's some truth to some of them, right? Where America is actually ruled by corporations. America is controlled by corporations, right? Do I think that it's some mysterious group of people hiding behind the shadows? No, I don't. But I do think that where the money is where the influence is. And when you have corporations that have billions of dollars worth of investments backing them, they make billions of dollars of profit every single year, and those are the ones lobbying the government, you're going to end up with an economic system that does not help the average everyday American. You're going to end up with the economic system that we have now, which allows for late-stage capitalism to develop, where product quality is diminished, where profits are pushed higher, and where the average person is not economically secure because the system is not designed to benefit the average American. The system currently is designed to benefit the corporations and the very wealthy. Now, there are many good ideas floating at how to fix this, right? Higher tax rates for corporations or for the very wealthy. Or, for example, eliminating or really reducing the ability for corporations to lobby. Or implementing term limits, right? The problem, especially when it comes to term limits, is the literal people who the term limits would be applied to are the people who would have to vote them in. You want to get laws passed, you have to go through the legislative branch. That means that if you want them to have term limits, you have to have them vote on ending their own careers. It's like an impossible situation to solve unless it really becomes a key driving force, a political motivator. We need millions upon millions of people to say that is what they want. They want term limits because then they're going to elect representatives who promise to do that. And if they don't follow through, then they don't get elected the next time around, right? It's this unfortunate situation where we need term limits to fix or to have people, the average American, better represented. Yet, in order to implement term limits, you have to have the literal people who they would affect vote them in. It's unfortunate. But I've been harping on this issue over and over again, just like the wages versus price issue, for years now, because it is the issue that matters. It is the political thing that matters. It is something that on one side of the coin is the thing that would help the most Americans, yet on the other side of the coin, it's the most difficult thing to do because you have to get the people who their careers are going to be ended to vote for it. But I've been harping on this for so long, and this is a finance and economics channel. This is not a political channel. Okay, this is not meant to be a political channel, but sometimes those things cross over, right? Because they're intertwined. Why? Once again, because politics are influence, business is money, and where there is money, there is influence. So by simply that, you have this crossover between politics and economics. I will continue to try to use my voice as much as possible, whether it's a big voice or a little voice, whether it's a loud voice or not, to try to bring awareness to the fact that we need term limits, not politically, but economically. And really, when you look at everyone's lives, people's lives are better or worse because of economic prosperity. Yes, many other things matter, but in reality, if you're going to say I have a great life or I have a bad life, a lot of that's tied to financial security and economic prosperity. And that only happens if we get a system or we start to move towards a system that actually benefits the average person. Not the, and I'm not even, look, the millionaire who owns a little shop on your main street, they're not the problem. They're not the issue. If those people genuinely help people, they've ran a business and they've created a service or a product, fantastic. I'm not an eat the rich person. Okay, I am at the end of the day a capitalist at heart because it's a system that currently works. But it needs to be constrained capitalism. There needs to be rules in place. And the problem is the massive corporations that are lobbying the governments. Is your local millionaire who owns a shop on Main Street lobbying our politicians? Maybe, but probably not to the extent that the billionaires, multi-billionaires, and $100 billion dollar corporations are lobbying our politicians. I hope this video was informative. If you like personal finance, world economics, and investing broken down as simply as it can be, then you are in the right place. If you like more structured videos, then definitely go check out the main channel. It's just my name, Derek Polishek. That is more structured. It's more edited, and I put more graphs on the screen, etc. And those come out weekly. But if you like this casual conversation, then you are in the right place. I don't think I said this at the beginning, but as always, my name is Derek. I got my degree in finance. You don't have to. I love this stuff, and I love sharing it with you guys. So I hope you stick around for the next video. Until then, take care.